Hey everyone, and welcome to our Warehouse Management video training, session number 4, SAP Business One Data Configuration. Resolv WMS works with a lot of the standard SAP Business One setup fields, such as bin locations, warehouses, item master data, fields like barcodes, units of measure, cycle count codes, etc., as well as some new fields that our add-on will create. This session will go over a lot of the required SAP data needed to run WMS effectively. The first SAP screen we're going to look at here is the warehouse setup screen. You can see here that we have added our own Resolv tab that has different fields and different settings for multiple modules that are in the Resolv suite. Since this video is WMS, we'll obviously just focus on the WMS configurations. And there's really two settings in here related to WMS. One is the in-transit warehouse checkbox. So if you are going to be utilizing the inventory transfer request process that we have in Resolv WMS, where we set up the ITR as basically two sides of a transaction, where there's an ITR pick, where you're picking it from the from warehouse, and then an ITR receipt, which you're doing a receipt at the to warehouse. We have that in-between warehouse where your items sit until the items are shipped, and that is the in-transit warehouse. So that is where you would designate this warehouse as that in-transit warehouse. We also have the option here for when you do a sales order or a reserve invoice pick list. When you are done with that pick list, we can have the system automatically create the SAP delivery. We can actually also have it create the delivery and the AR invoice. Or you can have it controlled manually, which then you would do the delivery yourself manually after the fact. And if you have our freight management module, freight management actually is the one controlling the delivery, because after you're done picking, you're going to be doing shipping and packing and all that other stuff. So then freight management makes the delivery. So within WMS, these three options here are the main ones you'd be able to choose from. And this is, again, a per warehouse option. So if warehouse 2 wants to be manual, warehouse 3 can have the delivery created automatic. Those are all per warehouse settings. And moving over to the SAP standard tab of bin locations, we will utilize certain settings in here, mostly the receiving bin settings and the auto allocate on receipt settings. These kind of come into play when you're doing receiving transactions on the WMS mobile. We will suggest defaulting in receiving bin based on these settings here you'll find here. And again, these are per warehouse settings, so they can differ. The next standard SAP screen we're going to review here is the item master data screen. Now, a lot of the standard SAP fields are utilized within Resolv WMS. Obviously, the item number and description we are going to display inside our mobile devices. We are going to respect any of the barcodes, and even on a per unit of measure basis. So if you've got barcodes for not just eaches, but for all of your different units of measure, we will respect those when you're scanning. So if I scan the each barcode, it will consider that I'm only scanning a single or an each, however you define that in your item. Or if I scan the case barcode, it will assume I'm counting, picking, receiving a case. So it respects all of the barcodes and their unit of measure associations. And obviously, speaking of units of measure, we also respect all the different units of measure, whether you're using barcodes or not. So your purchasing unit of measure, your sales unit of measure, inventory unit of measure, whatever unit of measure group and conversions you have set up for your item, we will respect those when utilizing WMS transactions in the Resolv Mobile. Here on the inventory data tab, there's also a field that comes into play, and that's the cycle count code field. So inside Resolv Mobile, there's multiple different counting screens, one of them being cycle counting screens. And those cycle counting screens will only let you count items where the next count date is today or prior. So in this example, since it's October 22nd and today is November 23rd, this will let me count this item. But if this happened to be, let's say, 1201, then when I try to pull it up on the Resolv Mobile, it won't let me. So this cycle count code and next count date do come into play when using the cycle count screens in Resolv WMS. And one thing also here is on remarks. Resolv WMS does allow you to display images. So if you upload a picture here into the item master data, this picture will show in Resolv Mobile. On the last tab here, this mobile scan, that is a new tab that is added by Resolv, and it's for serialized and batched items only. You can see that we have the option to make certain fields either hidden, optional, or required. So since this is a batch item, it's saying here that, okay, well, I want the require batch attribute 1 to be scanned. Well, that's just optional. So that's something that you don't have to enter in, but we will show you the field so that you can scan it in if you want to. Same here that I have set for batch attribute 2. I don't really care about scanning in detail, so I'm going to hide that field. And then my batch expiration date, that is required. That's a must. I won't let anybody scan in an item without putting in the expiration date for the batch. And the last 2 date fields here I'm going to hide. And I'll show you in a second in the mobile screen how that would all look. But before that, we can see here on the right hand side for batch attribute 1, 2, and details, we give you the option of putting your own label in there. So you can see this just says BA1. When we go to the mobile, you'll see that it actually will say BA1 instead of batch attribute 1. So if you call them different things, they may not know what batch attribute 1 is, but they will know item code manufacturer number. It'll show instead of batch attribute 1. So you can see here, now that we're actually inside the mobile, I'm at my batch entry in screen. I'm doing a goods receipt, and I put in my batch number, and I'll just enter, let's say, a quantity of 1, and I'll hit add, and it tells me I can't because the expiration date is required. So if you recall, we made expiration date required, we made these 2 fields just optional, and we hid all the other ones. You can also see here's my label that I wrote in. Instead of batch attribute 1, it just shows item code manufacturer number. The next screen here in SAP is the standard SAP bin location master data screen. Again, Resolv WMS works with a lot of these standard fields within here. So for instance, if you've got the barcode field for the bin, we will respect that. So inside Resolv Mobile, if you scanned something that said O2 REPL1, it would be able to be pulled up, but you could also use this barcode field if you had your own bin barcodes that you want to use instead. So we'll respect that when scanning as well as the bin code. We also utilize the minimum quantity and maximum quantity when using replenishment, where the system will suggest that items in what we call a replenishment source bin, which you can see this is one of our checkboxes, show me all the bins where my item is below minimum or below maximum, and then if that bin has items in it that can be replenished by these replenishment bins, it will suggest to bring the item up to maximum quantity. So the Minimax is a helpful utility for our replenishment process. We also respect all of these different restrictions. So if you wanted to say this is only for our batch item from before, then any transaction I try to do into this bin, if it's not for this item, it will stop me in Resolv Mobile. So I won't be able to receive in, transfer in any other item besides this one to this bin. Same with the units of measure restrictions. Same with the batch restrictions and transaction restrictions. If it's only inbound transactions only, then you wouldn't be able to take anything out of this bin. A couple of fields here that we've added on our own. The 2 main ones here that have to do with WMS are replenishment source and staging bin. A replenishment source, as we kind of just described, the replenishment source bin is kind of like your overstock bin. When your pick bins fall below minimum quantity or below maximum, then we will suggest taking items from the replenishment bins and move them over to the picking bin. So it's kind of more of a proactive replenishment versus just being, reactive when you find out and you got to pick something. Oh, where's this item? It's not in the bin anymore. I have to go find out where the overstock is. That's not an efficient way of doing a bin replenishing. You want to be proactive and go to our replenishment screen and say, show me which bins are below min or below max and where I can get the overstock from so I can refill my pick bins. The next standard SAP screen that we utilize is the Employee Master Data screen, in conjunction also with the SAP User screen. They kind of tie together. So my Employee Master Data record, this employee code number, is going to be the number that I use to log into Resolv Mobile. But obviously the Employee Master Data doesn't have a password itself and doesn't have a license itself. It's just an Employee Master Data record. So the Employee Master Data record needs to be linked to an SAP user code. And then within here, I've got obviously my password and options for super user or not super user. Again, we're utilizing these same fields in standard SAP for Resolv Mobile. So my employee code again is 5. That's how I'll log in. And this password here is set with my assigned user. That will be the password I use to log in. And then we also have this Resolv tab that we added that will allow you to set this user's default warehouse and then determine if you want to allow them to change between warehouses. So in this example, I've got the O2 warehouse set as my default. If I only wanted to allow this user into this one warehouse, then I would make sure this box is not checked. So it would default this warehouse for them, and then they would not be able to change or switch between warehouses. If this box is checked, then I'm able to have access to all the WMS databases. So that's what those two new options do here. We've also got a default report printer and default label printer. As you may see in another video, you can set up different printers and reports for different functions in WMS. You can set a default printer per form or also per warehouse, but this gets even more granular unless you set up a default report printer and label printer for this specific user. So if I work in a certain area of the warehouse all the time, there's no reason to make me walk to where the main printer is by the front of the warehouse. I'm usually in the back. You can set my default printer to that back printer, and that way it prints for me locally. I don't have to walk as far. And just really quick, wanted to show you that I mentioned the employee ID number, so you can see we have our list here and there. If I type in my name, you'll see I'm employee number 5. So that's what I would type in here, and then it defaults in my default warehouse like we saw in the other employee master data screen as well. The last standard SAP screen that we're going to go over here is the SAP authorizations, which obviously you guys utilize to set authorizations and permissions within inside SAP, but we also have authorizations and permissions for Resolv WMS on the mobile devices. Again, you saw my user before was a super user, so I have full authorizations to everything. But if we take this other user here and we come down here to user authorizations, you can see all of the Resolv module authorizations. We come down here to mobile, and we've got two main sections. We've got the mobile actual configuration screens from within SAP you can give authorizations to, which we'll look at in a later video. And then we have this employee security section, which basically allows you to show or remove each menu or individual screen per menu for each warehouse employee. So if you look, for example, right now, this employee has various authorizations. So I have no authorization to analytics or counting, or license plates, or printing, production. The only thing I have authorization to at the moment is inventory, which I have full authorization to, which gives me authorization to all these screens. And then in picking, I've got authorization except for a couple of these screens here I've removed. So I don't have SO picking and I don't have all picks, but I do have the others, which we'll be able to see once we log in. So you see if we log in, remember my user Ian was 5. You can see that I have all of the different menus, and within those menus I have all of the different submenus, all pick, sales order, everything that we have. And if I log back in as the IND user, you will see that I only have access to the two menus I gave authorizations to. So inventory, I have all of the screens, but if you recall back in picking, I took away these SO pick and the all pick, so I only have these other screens. So that's how we utilize the SAP authorization screen, but within our own module, we add our own authorizations that you will use to either, again, take away or give permissions to your individual warehouse employees. So that wraps up our video on what standard SAP screens and fields Resolv WMS utilizes. If you need any additional information on what the SAP configurations do, you can check your standard SAP documentation, or if you'd like more detailed explanations of what they do within Resolv, as well as what our new Resolv added fields do, you can simply check out our Resolv Management Warehouse User Guide. Thanks, and we'll see you next video.